The letter was 3 lines long, typed, not even signed by hand. Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. No explanation. No warning. Just my father's clipped, businesslike phrasing. The same tone he used for vendor contracts, now aimed at his own daughter. I read it twice at my kitchen table, coffee going cold beside it, and felt something settle in me that wasn't quite grief. It was clarity. I texted back 2 words. Understood. Then I opened my laptop. My name is Josephine Vance. I'm 34 years old. I used to wonder what it would take for my family to see me as more than the quiet cosigner, the reliable one, the daughter who showed up and never asked for credit. Until the day they cut me loose, I finally understood I'd been holding up more than they ever admitted. I logged into the business portal I still had access to, found my name buried in the guarantor section of the loan my father had used to expand the warehouse 2 years ago, and I began the paperwork to remove it. 36 hours later, my phone lit up like a switchboard. 78 missed calls. A string of emails, each more frantic than the last. The subject line of the final one just said, "We need to talk." I let the calls sit for a full day before I opened a single email. The first one was short, almost casual, like he thought this was a misunderstanding he could smooth over with a phone call. By the fourth, the tone had changed, shorter sentences, more exclamation points, the panic showing through the cracks in his usual composure. "Josephine, call me. This is serious. The bank is asking questions." I knew exactly what the bank was asking. I'd read every line of that loan agreement 3 years ago, back when my father sat across from me at this same table and said, "I just need your name on it, sweetheart. Formality. You've got the better credit score, that's all." I hadn't thought twice. That's what family did. I believed that then, the way I'd believed a lot of things about the Vances that turned out to be conditional. What he never told me was that removing my name wouldn't just be inconvenient. It would trigger a covenant review. The bank would reassess the loan's risk profile without my income backing it, and reassessment, on a stretched line of credit like his, rarely goes the borrower's way. I hadn't done it to hurt him. I'd done it because he told me, in writing, that I was no longer part of this family. I was simply taking him at his word. My mother called on the 3rd day, her voice carrying the particular strain of someone trying to sound calm while everything behind her was catching fire. "Your father didn't mean it like that," she said. "You know how he gets before the reunion. Stress. Money. He didn't think you'd actually." "Actually what?" I asked. "Take him seriously." Silence. That was answer enough. Growing up, I'd learned the family shorthand early. My father's decisions were absolute, delivered like verdicts, and everyone else's job was to absorb them quietly and move on. My brother got the business. My sister got the house down payment. I got asked to co-sign things, the warehouse loan, the delivery van lease, a line of credit for equipment 2 years before that, always with the same phrase. "Just a formality. You understand." I did understand, eventually. I understood that my usefulness had a specific shape, reliable, uncomplaining, financially entangled enough that walking away would always cost me something. "He's not sleeping," my mother said. "The bank wants a meeting by Friday." "That sounds difficult," I said, and I meant it, not unkindly, just honestly. It was difficult. I wasn't going to pretend otherwise, and I also wasn't going to pretend I owed him relief from it. "Josephine." "I have to go, Mom," I said. "Tell Dad I hope the meeting goes well." I hung up before she could ask the question underneath all her questions. "Are you going to fix this?" I already knew my answer. The Friday meeting came and went, and by Monday, my father had stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. His email arrived at 6 a.m., subject line blank, message body just 4 sentences. The bank restructured the loan terms. New rate, shorter timeline. I need to know if you'll reconsider. This affects your brother too. That last line was the one meant to move me, not an appeal to me, but to my sense of obligation toward someone else. That was always how it worked in my family. Direct requests were rare. Guilt was the currency, and it was always spent through a third party. I thought about my brother, Callum, who'd inherited the business 2 years ago in a ceremony my father called just paperwork when I asked why my name wasn't on the deed too, despite the fact I'd worked there summers longer than he had. I thought about how easily family expanded to include my obligations and contracted around my rewards. I didn't reply to the email. Instead, I called Callum directly. "Did you know?" I asked. "About the loan. About what Dad said to me." There was a pause too long to be innocent. I didn't think he'd actually send that letter, Callum said quietly. I told him it was a bad idea. But you didn't stop him. Joe, it's complicated. No, I said. It's really not. I hung up, and for the first time, I let myself feel the full shape of what 34 years of complicated had cost me. I spent that week doing something I hadn't done in over a decade. I hired my own lawyer, not the family's, not my father's longtime attorney who drafted every loan agreement with a wink and a handshake. Someone with no history at our dinner table. Her name was Priyanka O'Yeleran, sharp-eyed, unhurried, the kind of person who read every document twice before she spoke. You were never fairly compensated for the risk you carried, she said, sliding the old loan agreement back across her desk. 3 years of guarantor exposure, no equity, no formal role. Legally, they got a business partner's liability with none of a business partner's stake. I'd known that, somewhere underneath the family loyalty I'd been raised to perform. Hearing it stated plainly, without softness, without "but he's still your father," felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. What are my options? I asked. You already exercised the strongest one, she said. You removed your name. Now it's about whether you want anything else: compensation for prior risk, formal severance from any remaining ties to the business, or nothing. Walking away clean is also a valid choice. I thought of the reunion letter. Don't bother coming. We're cutting ties. I want it in writing, I said. Everything. A full release. If we're done, I want us actually done, not done until it's inconvenient for them. Priyanka almost smiled. That's the first request I've heard all week that isn't complicated. The formal release document went out on a Wednesday. Priyanka called it clean and unambiguous. Full severance from any financial obligation to Vance Freight, past or future, plus a modest settlement reflecting 3 years of unpaid guarantor risk. Not vengeance. Just, finally, the math done fairly. My father's response came 4 days later, not through email this time, but in person. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, something he hadn't done since I was in college, standing in my doorway looking smaller than I remembered, like the letter he'd written had cost him more than he expected. You could have just called me back, he said. We could have talked this through like family. You didn't want to talk it through, I said, standing in the doorway, not inviting him in. You wanted me to absorb it quietly, the way I always have. This time I didn't. I was angry when I wrote that letter, he admitted. Your mother said some things about you missing the anniversary dinner, and You didn't call to ask my side, I said. You typed 3 sentences and cut me out like a line item. He didn't have an answer for that. For the first time in my life, my father stood in front of me without a script. The settlement stands, I said gently. Sign it, and we're square. No more formalities disguised as family. He looked at the folder in his hands for a long moment, then nodded once, and left without asking to come inside. He signed it 2 weeks later. No ceremony, no final conversation, just a notarized copy that arrived by courier, with a small yellow sticky note in his handwriting. Take care of yourself, Joe. 4 words. More tenderness than I'd gotten in the 3-line letter that started all of this, and somehow, it still wasn't enough to undo what had already shifted between us. The reunion happened without me, exactly as instructed. I heard about it secondhand, from a cousin who didn't know the whole story, just that Josephine wasn't coming this year. She said my mother looked tired the whole weekend. She said Callum barely spoke to anyone. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that. I felt something quieter, a kind of settling, the way a house does after long pressure finally releases from its frame. With the settlement money, I did something I'd wanted to do for years but never let myself consider. I put a deposit on a small commercial space downtown, the beginning of a bookkeeping firm I'd design entirely on my own terms. No guarantor clauses. No family formalities. No fine print with someone else's name quietly attached to my risk. I named it Vance & Company, not for my father, but because it was, after all this time, finally mine to name. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the peace. A year after the letter, my father called on my birthday for the first time without an agenda attached. No loan, no favor, no family emergency dressed up as concern. Just, happy birthday, Joe. I hope it's a good one. I let myself believe him, cautiously, the way you trust whether that's been unpredictable for a long time. We talk now, occasionally, carefully. He's never fully apologized. I don't think he has the language for that, not after a lifetime of treating obligation as affection, but he's stopped asking me to prove my loyalty through liability. That, from him, is its own kind of apology. My business turned a profit in its first 8 months. Callum came by once, unannounced, and stood in the doorway the way our father had stood in mine, saying he was proud of me in a voice that sounded like he meant it, even if it came a little late. I still think about that reunion sometimes, not with bitterness, but with something closer to gratitude. It taught me the difference between the people who claim you when it's convenient and the ones who choose you even when it costs them something. I chose myself first. Everything steadier came after. My name is still on the door. This time, it means something different.